Annalise stands tall in front of her massive bedroom window, feeling the sun warm her face like it's blessing her with a new day. She's got this regal posture, a kind of delicate strength that comes from years of living in high society. People always notice her deep cocoa skin, glowing in the early morning light, and that cascade of thick, spiraling curls that bounce whenever she turns her head. There's an unmistakable grace in her movements, a hint that she's used to attention but doesn't quite let it go to her head. Her eyes, a soft brown that can turn fierce when she's determined, show a quiet confidence. She grew up in a world of luxury, designer clothes, elegant parties, and polished social events that had her smiling for cameras and shaking all the right hands. But behind that perfect exterior, there's this little flicker of vulnerability she can't shake off. Sometimes, at night, she'd catch a glimpse of herself in the mirror and feel a pang of something she can't explain. Maybe it's a longing for something real, or maybe it's a fear that her life isn't entirely her own. She's always been told how to act, where to be, and what was expected of her. Yet, she's never broken out of the mold. Maybe she doesn't know how. This morning, though, something feels different. The warm glow through the window and the gentle hum of the city streets below give her a subtle nudge. It's like they're telling her there's more to discover. More than just this polished, perfect bubble. Annalise doesn't know what's coming, but there's a quiet spark in her heart, hinting that her well-ordered life might soon change, and maybe, deep down, she actually wants it to. She's not sure what it is, but she senses it's already on its way. Annalise strolls into this bustling cafe that's practically humming with life. There's the hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of cups, and the murmur of busy customers chattering about their plans. She makes her way to the counter, ready to order her usual latte with a hint of caramel, when she catches sight of a figure through the large glass window. At first, she's not sure why her gaze drifts that way, but something about the person huddled near the door tugs at her heart. The man's wrapped in layers of worn-out clothes, trying to keep warm against the crisp morning chill. His gaunt face is set in a resigned expression, like he's already come to terms with life passing him by. She notices he's shivering, though the cafe's interior is just a few steps away. Annalise tries to focus on the barista asking for her order, but her attention keeps drifting back to the man outside. Guilt creeps in as she realizes how quickly she's about to spend more money on a single drink than he probably sees all day. A wave of discomfort rushes through her. She's never been face to face with such raw need before. Sure, she's donated to charity galas and fundraiser balls, but she's never felt that immediate jolt of empathy like she does now. She grabs her latte and edges toward a small table by the window. She can't stop looking at him, watching as he tries to tuck his hands into his sleeves, desperately searching for any scrap of warmth. The contrast between her cozy seat and his harsh reality is too stark to ignore. In that moment, something in Annalise shifts, like a gentle crack forming in the polished veneer she's worn for so long. Annalise sits there, heart-thumping, latte growing cold in her hands as she watches the man outside struggle with the icy wind slicing through his threadbare clothing. She's always prided herself on doing the right thing, at least in the ways her society circle has taught her, writing checks, attending charity luncheons, and making appearances that look good in glossy magazines. But this is different. She feels an immediate pull, like she can't just walk away from him and pretend he's not there. There's a heaviness in her chest, and her gaze drifts to the fur coat draped over the back of her chair. It's one of her most prized possessions, a symbol of luxury, status, and her mother's constant reminders that elegance is everything. Without giving herself time to overthink, she stands up, nearly knocking over her latte in the process. Her heels click sharply against the tiled floor as she heads for the door, coat in hand. A few people glance her way, curiosity lighting their eyes, but no one stops her. Stepping outside, she feels the cold hit her cheeks and wonders for a split second if this is the right move. But the shivering man lifts his eyes and sees her coming, and something inside her just knows. She moves closer, carefully draping the soft, warm fur around his shoulders. For a heartbeat, they stand there in a kind of stunned silence. She can see the surprise and confusion in his eyes, and she's guessing he sees the same in hers. She half expects him to refuse it, to wave her away, but he just clutches the coat with trembling fingers. Annalise can't find the words to speak. Her throat tightens with a mix of compassion and fear. She's doing the small act of kindness, but it feels monumental, like a single step that might change everything she's known so far. Time seems to slow down as Annalise watches the man clutch her fur coat, his worn hands gripping the luxurious fabric like he's terrified it'll vanish. His lips part in disbelief, and he mutters something that gets swallowed by the bustling noise around them. She leans in, trying to catch his words. Finally, in a choked whisper, he manages to say, This must be expensive. That's when the strangest feeling washes over Annalise, something almost electric sparking along her spine. She can't place it at first, but there's a familiarity in his voice that rattles her to the core. Her heart beats so loudly she thinks everybody in the cafe courtyard can hear it. She blinks rapidly, trying to clear her head, but the feeling only intensifies. Memories she can't quite pin down begin nudging at the back of her mind. There's something about the way he spoke, how his voice trembled, that stirs an old emotion. It's like a distant bell chiming in a dream, calling her attention to something she's long buried. Annalise stands there, rooted to the spot, latte still in her hand and wind stinging her eyes. She tells herself she's imagining things, maybe he just sounds like someone she knew in another life, or maybe the weather is messing with her head. But she can't shake it. As he wraps the coat tighter, his tired eyes flick up to meet hers, and there's a flicker of recognition there too. She wonders if he feels it, that strange jolt of familiarity. Her breath catches in her throat, and for a moment she forgets the entire world is watching. All she knows is that something about this man is ringing a forgotten bell deep inside her, and it won't stop echoing, no matter how much she tries to ignore it. Annalise steps closer, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by and the frosty breeze that's starting to numb her cheeks. She can't tear her eyes away from the man holding her coat. His voice keeps replaying in her head, that shaky, humble tone that somehow resonates with a memory she's tried to forget. She leans in, heart pounding like a drum, and quietly asks, "Sir, have we met before?" It's a simple question, but it feels like she's prying open a locked door in her mind. He looks at her, confusion etched on his face, and for a second she thinks maybe she's made a mistake. Then he speaks again, this time a little clearer, and it's like a lightning bolt straight to her soul. "You look so much like," he begins, but can't finish, his words trailing off as tears threaten to spill from his weary eyes. The shock hits Annalise so hard she almost stumbles backward. There's something about his voice, a note she recognizes from long ago, a voice that once comforted her when she was little, telling her bedtime stories about princesses and brave knights. She stares at him, her hands trembling so badly she almost drops her latte cup. Could it really be him? The possibility alone rattles her to the core. She tries to steady herself, taking a shallow breath. Her mother's voice echoes in her mind, scolding her for letting her imagination run wild. But this is too real. She peers at his face, searching through the grime and exhaustion for features she knows from old photo albums. When the question forms on her lips, "Dad," she hardly recognizes her own voice. She's half hoping he'll say no, that she's just lost in a crazy moment. But deep down she already knows. She stands there, heartbeat thudding, the word "Dad" still on her lips, hanging in the chilly morning air. The man's eyes widen, and for a second he looks like he might bolt. But then he speaks her name, quietly, almost reverently, like he's caressing a precious memory. The moment stretches, thick with tension and disbelief. Annalise feels an odd combination of relief and fear swirling inside her. This is the father she barely remembers, the one who vanished when she was just a child, leaving nothing behind but an empty space in the family photo frames. He moves his mouth like he wants to apologize or explain, but only silence comes out at first. The cafe crowd continues its frantic dance, cars honk in the distance, and the wind whips through the streets, but it's like everything else fades into the background. Annalise wants to speak, to demand answers, to throw her arms around him, or maybe just run. She can't decide which impulse is stronger, her fury at his absence, or the sudden rush of love she thought she'd buried years ago. The fur coat around him looks so out of place, a glaring sign of her wealth draped over a man who's clearly been through hell. She can't help noticing every little detail, his cheeks hollowed from hunger, his hair graying too soon, and the faint shake in his hands that might be from the cold or from a lifetime's worth of regret. In that moment, she realizes there's no going back to the life she had just a few minutes ago. Something's changed irreversibly. The father she believed gone forever stands before her, no longer a distant memory or a cautionary tale told by her mother, but a flesh-and-blood reality that demands to be acknowledged. Later that evening, long after the commotion at the cafe, Annalise finds herself back in her opulent bedroom. The events of the day replay in her mind like a loop she can't shut off. Seeing her father after so many years, ragged and broken on the street, is something she never could have imagined in her wildest dreams. She tries to recall every detail of her childhood with him, little moments like him carrying her on his shoulders, reading bedtime stories, and humming lullabies that made her feel safe. Those memories feel like faded snapshots from another life, but now they stir with painful clarity. She paces the plush carpet, running her hands over the neatly arranged perfume bottles on her dresser. Everything in this room screams privilege and comfort, and she can't help but feel a wave of guilt, wondering where her father's been sleeping all this time. Images of him shivering under that coat haunt her. She thinks back to the day he disappeared, how her mother's eyes looked suspiciously dry when she broke the news, how the staff tiptoed around the subject as if mentioning his name was forbidden. There was never a concrete explanation. She used to cry herself to sleep, waiting for him to return, but eventually she just learned to stop asking. Now that he's back, even if only by a strange twist of fate, she feels a burning need for answers. What happened all those years ago? Why did he never come back for her? And why is he on the streets while she lives in luxury? She can't shake the feeling that there's a story here far more complicated than the simple narrative she was fed. As she crawls under the silky covers that night, the old shadows of her past loom larger than ever, and she can't escape the sense that everything she thought she knew is about to be turned upside down. The next morning, Annalise wakes up after a fitful sleep, her mind still buzzing with the shock of finding her father. She's tempted to brush it off like a bad dream, but the image of him clutching her coat is too vivid to ignore. As she gets dressed for the day, she feels an uneasy split forming inside her. On one hand, she's the refined heiress with a perfect wardrobe and a schedule full of social engagements, but on the other, she's the daughter of a man who's been living on the streets. It's like she's living two lives that are about to collide head-on. She stands before her ornate mirror, smoothing down her tailored blazer, and can't help but notice the faint circles under her eyes. The makeup and the designer outfit don't quite mask the confusion that's now a constant buzz in her head. She recalls the hush-hush conversations she overheard growing up, the sudden shift in her mother's demeanor whenever anyone mentioned her father. Back then, she was too young to piece it all together, but now she senses there were secrets she was never meant to uncover. All day long, as she moves through her usual routine, attending a charity luncheon, smiling politely at acquaintances, her thoughts keep drifting to her father. She wonders where he is, if he's still trembling on that sidewalk, or if he found some temporary shelter for the night. She also can't help but wonder what he's thinking about her. Does he see her as the child he lost, or is she just a reminder of a life that slipped away? This internal tug-of-war tears at her heart. She can't shake off the feeling that the polished, confident version of herself is only half the story and the other half has just come crashing in, forcing her to reevaluate everything she thought was true. That evening, Annalise finds herself at a grand gala held in the city's most luxurious hotel ballroom. Every chandelier sparkles, every guest is dressed to the nines, and every table overflows with gourmet delicacies. It's a world she's fully accustomed to, a place where wealthy families flaunt their status under the guise of philanthropy. But tonight, she feels more like an outsider than she ever has. She's here in a stunning gown her mother picked out, nodding politely at compliments she doesn't really hear, and exchanging pleasantries with socialites who only see the polished surface. As she drifts from conversation to conversation, her mind keeps circling back to her father. She imagines his worn face and tired eyes, thinking how his presence would cause a stir if he were here right now. She recalls how her mother always spoke of preserving the family's legacy, an endless mantra about upholding tradition, earning respect, and never letting the world see them sweat. The weight of that idea settles heavily on her shoulders tonight. How can she reconcile this glamorous lineage with the fact that her own father is out there alone, cold, and forgotten? At one point, she slips away to a quiet corner near a marble pillar decorated with lavish floral arrangements. She takes a deep breath and stares at her reflection in the polished floor. This is her heritage, a legacy of wealth, expectation, and a carefully controlled public image. Yet there's a gaping void in the narrative, her father's disappearance and the unanswered questions surrounding it. She wonders if anyone here suspects her turmoil, if they can see past the graceful smiles she's been trained to wear. The more she thinks about it, the more she realizes that maintaining this legacy might mean hiding the truth, and she's not sure how much longer she can keep doing that. Annalise heads home from the gala, her thoughts still swirling. The house is dark when she arrives, except for the soft glow of a single lamp in the living room. She finds her mother sitting there, posture perfectly straight, sipping tea from delicate china. There's a tense stillness in the air, like her mother's been waiting for her. Annalise feels the familiar sense of apprehension creeping in, the same feeling she's had since she was a little girl trying to please a woman whose expectations seemed impossible to meet. "Did you enjoy the event?" her mother asks, her tone clipped yet polite. Annalise nods, though her mind is miles away. She hesitates, weighing whether to mention her father. The question tears at her. Has her mother known where he was all this time? Did she turn a blind eye? The older woman takes another sip, giving nothing away with her pristine facade. A painting of their family from years ago hangs on the wall, the father's figure notably absent. Or maybe it's not absent, but forcibly erased from the narrative. Memories flood Annalise's mind, nights she overheard hushed arguments, times she saw her mother's eyes flash with anger at any mention of her father's name. She remembers how her mother would say, "We must maintain dignity no matter what," as though revealing any vulnerability was a sin. Now, faced with the truth that her father is alive and suffering, Annalise's sense of loyalty wavers. She feels torn between respecting the woman who raised her and the father who disappeared. She opens her mouth to speak but finds the words catch in her throat. All she can manage is a faint whisper, "I saw someone today." Her mother's gaze sharpens and the tension in the room thickens. Annalise realizes that once the secret is out, there might be no going back. In the days that follow, Annalise can't shake the feeling that she's missing a vital piece of the puzzle, something that might explain her father's disappearance and why nobody in her family ever talks about it. Late one afternoon, feeling restless and uneasy, she drifts to the old attic at the top of the house. It's a space she's rarely explored, mostly because her mother always insisted it was full of dusty junk and unimportant relics. But today, her curiosity wins out. Climbing the creaky wooden steps, she flips on a dim overhead bulb. The attic is cluttered with boxes and old furniture draped in sheets. A musty smell hangs in the air, but there's also a hint of nostalgia. She wonders how many family secrets are piled up here, hidden under layers of dust. Carefully, she starts opening boxes, rummaging through yellowed newspapers, brittle documents, and faded Polaroids. At first, she finds nothing more than random memorabilia. Old trophies, long-forgotten knickknacks, and a box of her childhood toys. But then, she spots a trunk in the corner, smaller than the rest, locked with a rusty latch. With a determined tug, she manages to open it. Inside, she discovers letters bound together with a fraying ribbon and a stack of photographs that instantly catch her eye. One photo shows her father in a suit, smiling broadly at some function she doesn't recognize. Another has him laughing with a group of men she's never seen before. But it's the letters that draw her in the most. Some are addressed to her father. Others bear her mother's name. As she schemes through them, scattered phrases jump out. Mentions of a secret deal, a betrayal, and a desperate choice that might have driven him away. Annalise's heart races, realizing these hidden clues might be the key to unraveling a story she was never meant to know. In the following weeks, Annalise becomes consumed by what she found in the attic. Every spare moment is spent poring over those letters and photos, trying to piece together the fragments of a life she never knew. It's like she's connecting dots in a puzzle that's been deliberately scattered. Some letters reference her father's old business associates, people who once stood shoulder to shoulder with him, shaking hands in glossy pictures, all smiles and promises. Yet, there are hints that those same people later turned their backs on him, leaving him vulnerable and alone. Driven to anyone who might have known him. The first few calls go nowhere. Old phone numbers are disconnected, and the addresses on the envelopes lead to places long abandoned. Still, she persists, searching social media, tapping into her family's social circles, even visiting public records in dusty city archives. Little by little, she uncovers a network of names, a patchwork of folks who once admired her father for his ambition, or feared him for the power he wielded, or maybe both. Some are reluctant to talk, clearly uneasy about drudging up the past. Others open up, painting a picture of a man who was once respected in certain elite circles yet harbored secrets that eventually cost him everything. One contact leads to another, and soon Annalise finds herself with a list of individuals who might hold the final pieces of the puzzle. Each conversation is tinged with heartbreak and betrayal, as if her father's downfall was the result of a slow, painful spiral set in motion by forces she can barely comprehend. The more she digs, the more she realizes this hidden network of people is tied together by a shared history of ambition, envy, and ruin. And she's only just begun to scratch the surface. Annalise knows she can't keep this investigation to herself forever. But the deeper she goes, the more twisted the story becomes. Late at night, she sits at her desk with a cup of cold tea, reading and rereading the letters. Words like betrayal, embezzlement, and blackmail jump out at her, painting an ugly picture she never dreamed was lurking behind her family's spotless reputation. It appears her father got tangled in a series of bad deals, but there are hints that he was also the victim of manipulation, double-crossed by associates who wanted to shift blame and protect their own wealth. She confronts her mother with some of the evidence, but the older woman's lips press into a thin line. "Those are ancient matters best left buried," she says, refusing to discuss further. Annalise doesn't back down, though. She can't. She feels like she's been living a life built on half-truths and illusions, and every new discovery tears another hole in the fabric of her carefully woven reality. If her mother knows more than she's letting on, it's clear she intends to take it to her grave. Still, Annalise presses on, reaching out to some of the business figures mentioned in the letters. A few slam the door in her face, literally and metaphorically. Others dodge her calls. But one older gentleman agrees to meet her discreetly in a dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of town. He spills just enough details to confirm her worst fears. Powerful players orchestrated her father's downfall to cover their own tracks. Money was siphoned off, deals were made under the table, and when the time came to face the music, her father was left twisting in the wind. Annalise leaves the cafe shaken, carrying a weight of truths that make her question everything she once believed about loyalty and family. Day by day, Annalise feels like she's peeling back layers of a rotten onion. Every new revelation makes her eyes sting, and there's always another layer beneath. She meets an estranged cousin who admits that the family was never as harmonious as she thought. Whispers of old feuds, hidden debts, and power plays come tumbling out. The cousin speaks of how her father was an easy scapegoat when everything went south, how he tried to fight back but found himself ensnared in a web of deceit that stretched further than he ever imagined. Annalise can barely wrap her head around the scope of it. She uncovers records showing how quickly her father's supposed allies distanced themselves from him when scandals broke. And it wasn't just business partners, some relatives also cut ties, either too proud or too scared to stand by him. There are scraps of letters hinting that he tried to clear his name, but the forces against him were too strong. It's no wonder he ended up disappearing. The humiliation alone must have been crushing, and that's before she even factors in the possible threats he might have faced. As she listens to these testimonies, seeing tears glisten in the eyes of people who once respected her father, she senses the heartbreak that lingers still. They recount how gentle he was with his employees, how he always tried to help those less fortunate. And yet here he is, living on the streets, labeled a failure by the very society that once praised him. With every new person she interviews, she's struck by the realization that one man's downfall can ripple through an entire network of lives. These echoes of betrayal don't just belong to her father, they've scarred everyone around him, including a daughter who's only now realizing how deep those wounds truly go. The day finally comes when Annalise can no longer sit back and collect stories from the sidelines. One name keeps cropping up in her research, a former close associate of her father, someone rumored to have played a key role in orchestrating his downfall. She tracks this person to a private club in a ritzy part of town, a place where the wealthy and influential gather under the cloak of exclusivity. Dressed in her finest attire, she squares her shoulders and steps inside, heart pounding with a mix of nerves and determination. She finds him seated in a plush leather armchair, sipping whiskey with an air of self-satisfaction. At first, he refuses to talk, dismissing her questions as digging up old graves. But Annalise refuses to be brushed off. She presses on, voice steady, though her hands clench with anger. She demands to know why her father was abandoned, why everyone turned on him when he needed them most. The man's cold gaze narrows, and he finally acknowledges her with a sneer. He spins a tale of business deals gone wrong and hush money paid to keep certain truths from surfacing. He doesn't confirm everything, but his slippery half-answers are enough to expose the shape of what happened. The tension in the room is electric. Annalise feels a swirl of emotions crashing over her, outrage, grief, and a fierce need to protect her father's name. She can't help but raise her voice, attracting curious looks from other patrons. She confronts him with evidence gleaned from the letters and testimonies, forcing him to squirm. By the end of it, he stands up, muttering threats that she doesn't fully understand yet. But she's shaken him, and that feels like a small victory. As she leaves the club, she realizes this confrontation is only the beginning of a much bigger reckoning. Annalise finally gets her father to agree to meet and share his side of the story. They sit together in a quiet park, far from the prying eyes of society. He looks better than the first day she saw him on the street. He's had a chance to wash up and borrow some decent clothes. But she still notices the hollowness in his cheeks and the anxiety flickering in his gaze. With a trembling sigh, he begins to recount his long, painful descent from a life of affluence to the cold pavement of back alleys. He talks about the early days when he was riding high, building connections, and creating a name for himself. He had big plans to expand the family's business and secure a legacy that would make his daughter proud. But somewhere along the way, he crossed paths with the wrong people, investors who demanded more than he could deliver, supposed friends who vanished at the first sign of trouble. He describes the panic of mounting debts, the cutthroat negotiations behind closed doors, and the betrayal that came from those he trusted most. When the scandals finally broke, he was left with nowhere to turn. Banks froze his assets, colleagues disavowed him, and tabloids tore his reputation to shreds. The legal troubles that followed drained what little he had left, and soon he found himself drifting, too ashamed to face his family. He tried to fight back but discovered that money and power can be wielded like weapons. By the time he realized how deep the pit was, he'd lost everything: his home, his pride, and most of all, the chance to see his daughter grow up. As he speaks, tears well in his eyes, and Annalise feels the depth of his regret. For the first time, she truly understands the cost of his silence and the agony of his long, lonely journey. After hearing her father's story, Annalise can't help but feel a sense of whiplash every time she steps back into her luxurious world. She'll be at a high-end boutique trying on an evening gown for another charity function and suddenly picture her father curled up in a doorway hoping for spare change. She'll sit down at an elegant dinner party, the table laden with gourmet dishes, and remember the raw hunger in his eyes. The contrast is gut-wrenching. She starts noticing how people in her social circle speak about poverty, often with a detached pity, as though homelessness is some abstract problem rather than a pressing human crisis. One evening, as she's listening to idle chatter about the city's growing population of beggars, she realizes just how far removed these folks are from the realities her father endures. They treat it like a mild annoyance, something that tarnishes their pristine neighborhoods and must be cleared away. It makes her skin crawl. Her father, meanwhile, struggles with the indignities of being looked at like a pest. He shares how, over the years, passers-by avoided his eyes as if acknowledging him was too uncomfortable. He talks about the times he was kicked off park benches and shoved out of storefronts simply because he had nowhere else to go. Annalise feels an ache in her chest every time he recounts another indignity. She realizes that, in this city, class isn't just about money, it's about how you're perceived and what people think you deserve. Though she's firmly planted in the upper echelon, she can no longer ignore the human cost of that privilege. If the world can reduce her father, a once-respected figure, to a near-invisible beggar, who else is slipping through the cracks? The question keeps gnawing at her, filling her with a desperate need to bridge this divide that's tearing her family apart. One evening, Annalise invites her father to a modest apartment she's rented in a quieter part of town. It's nothing like the lavish estate she calls home, but it offers a sense of privacy and neutrality, somewhere they can talk without the looming shadow of her mother's disapproval. As they settle onto a worn-out couch, she steels herself for the conversation she's been dreading. He can see the turmoil in her eyes and gently urges her to speak. Through trembling words, Annalise admits that she's been uncovering the truth behind his downfall. She details the letters, the shady deals, and the names of people who turned on him. She confesses her anger at discovering how her own family let him slip through the cracks. Tears threaten to spill as she recalls the humiliating details of his life on the streets. Then she asks the burning question, "Why didn't you come back for me? Why didn't you tell me what was really going on?" Her father, eyes rimmed with regret, explains that he believed she'd be better off without him. He feared the scandal and the shame would taint her future if he stayed. He'd hoped that by stepping away, he could shield her from the fallout. But as time wore on and things got worse, he felt he had no way to return without dragging her down into his mess. He chokes up as he describes the countless times he stood outside her school or her events, watching from a distance, too ashamed to reach out. The weight of his confession settles between them. They both realize how fear and pride kept them apart for so long. It's a painful reckoning, but in the sharing of secrets, there's a flicker of hope. Maybe now they can start healing together. The days that follow feel like a cautious dance between father and daughter, each trying to make sense of their fractured bond. Annalise finds herself juggling her public persona, attending high-profile events, managing her responsibilities, with private moments spent learning who her father truly is now. In those quieter times, she discovers glimpses of the man she vaguely remembers from childhood. He's still compassionate and quick to listen, but there's an undercurrent of sadness he can't quite shake. He tells her about the people who showed him small kindnesses on the street, strangers who offered sandwiches, a blanket, or just a conversation when he felt invisible. Annalise listens intently, absorbing the realities of a world she never really knew existed. She starts to see how redemption isn't just about one grand gesture, it's built from 1,000 small choices to keep going in the face of despair. Each day, her father makes a choice to face his past, to let go of the shame that's been weighing him down. Meanwhile, Annalise wrestles with her own sense of guilt and responsibility. She wonders if she could have done more to find him if she hadn't been so immersed in her sheltered life. But she's determined not to be paralyzed by regret. Instead, she focuses on forging a path forward. She suggests they seek legal aid to clear his name from the lingering accusations. She floats the idea of therapy, or at least talking with someone who can guide them through this emotional minefield. With every step they take, a door seems to open where previously there was only a wall. It's not easy. Old wounds flare up and there are moments of tension and unspoken hurt. But they keep trying. And for the first time, they both sense that maybe, just maybe, they can build a future where their shared pain becomes the foundation for something stronger. Despite the cautious hope between Annalise and her father, old wounds still flare up. One chilly afternoon, she brings him to a formal gathering to ease him back into the world he left. Dressed in a borrowed suit, he looks almost like the man she remembers from childhood except for the tension in his jaw and the haunted look in his eyes. The room buzzes with people who either knew him in his heyday or only recall his name from scandal-scarred gossip columns. As they drift from one polite chat to another, it becomes clear not everyone is ready to forget. A well-connected guest, emboldened by too many cocktails, makes a cutting remark about washed-up businessmen who can't keep their fortunes. The words slice through the air, and Annalise sees her father's composure crumble. He tries to stay calm, but his fists clench and his voice trembles. She feels a hot surge of fury, wanting to lash out, but he meets her eyes, silently pleading for restraint. They leave early, adrenaline still coursing through them. In the quiet of her car, he buries his face in his hands, overwhelmed by shame. Annalise watches, her heart breaking as she realizes how fragile their reconciliation is. This is a breaking point where both must decide if the fight is worth it. She places a trembling hand on his shoulder, whispering she won't abandon him again. His tearful nod is all she needs to see. The silence between them on the drive home speaks volumes. She knows that every step forward might bring another harsh reminder of his past. But she also knows they've come too far to turn back now. If they stand together, maybe they can weather the storm and finally find the redemption they both crave. In the aftermath of that disastrous gathering, things seem to settle into a tense routine. Annalise helps her father with small steps toward regaining a semblance of normal life, accompanying him to the bank, seeking legal aid, and quietly counseling him when nightmares about the past resurface. Yet, as their bond grows stronger, a new threat emerges from the shadows. One evening, she's sifting through her father's old paperwork when she comes across a letter slipped into his mailbox without a return address. Inside is a cryptic message suggesting someone knows more about the family's secrets than they've let on. At first, she brushes it off as a hoax or a leftover piece of the endless gossip that once surrounded her father. But a few days later, a second note arrives, this time with veiled threats about exposing the truth unless certain demands are met. Shaken, Annalise confronts her father. He looks pale as he reads the notes, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He refuses to name names, but he warns her this could be tied to the powerful people who orchestrated his downfall. They might be testing the waters, he murmurs, dread heavy in his voice. From that point on, an uneasy paranoia settles over their daily lives. Annalise starts double-checking door locks and glancing over her shoulder when she walks through parking lots. She can feel a watchful presence lurking, though she can't prove it. Each time her phone rings from an unknown number, her heart pounds, bracing for more threats. She realizes this is bigger than just reuniting with her father. There are forces that want to keep old secrets buried for good. And now father and daughter stand at the brink of a confrontation they never asked for but can no longer avoid. The tension from the anonymous threats weighs heavily on Annalise's mind. She decides it's time for a bolder step, returning to the long-abandoned family estate where she spent her early childhood. It's a sprawling property tucked away at the edge of town, shuttered for years under her mother's orders. If there are answers about her father's past or clues to what these new threats might mean, that estate might hold them. She and her father drive out on a cloudy afternoon. The once grand driveway is overgrown with weeds and the mansion's exterior looks worn by time and neglect. Broken windows and peeling paint give the place an eerie quality, like a ghost of better days. A wave of nostalgia and sorrow hits her father the moment they step out of the car. He runs a hand over a crumbling stone pillar, whispering stories of the estate's past splendor. Inside, dust motes swirl in the stale air. The hallways are dark, with old portraits still hanging crookedly on the walls. Annalise recognizes a painting of her mother, regal and steely-eyed. Across from it is one of her father, taken in happier times. The place is steeped in memories, some warm, some painful, all of them leaving an ache in Annalise's chest. They venture into his old office, carefully sifting through drawers and cabinets. They find faded documents, ancient receipts, and half-burned photographs that hint at shady deals. Her father recalls crucial meetings that took place within these walls, conversations that set his fate in motion. As they gather evidence and piece together fragments of his downfall, Annalise can't help but feel that they're being watched. The decaying grandeur of this mansion is a silent testament to everything they've lost and possibly a key to uncovering what still threatens them from the shadows. In the days following their trip to the estate, Annalise notices a shift in her daily life. The comfortable spheres she once navigated, charity events, social luncheons, and high-end boutiques, begin to clash with the gritty truths she now carries. It's like she's caught between two realities. On one side, she's expected to maintain her polished composure, mingling with people who see her as the epitome of grace and privilege. On the other, she's knee-deep in old secrets, lurking threats, and her father's painful struggles. Tension seeps into her every interaction. At a charity gala, she overhears a group of socialites gossiping about a reclusive businessman who fell from grace years ago. She fights the urge to explode, knowing they're talking about her father without realizing he's within earshot. She spots him across the room, awkwardly nursing a glass of water, CLE. Tinks scream to protect him from snide remarks and sideways glances. At the same time, her father grapples with the ghosts of his past. Old friends, maybe better called former allies, are torn between pity and suspicion. A few approach him with guarded sympathy, while others keep their distance, worried he's a magnet for scandal. Annalise can almost see the invisible barrier that forms whenever he tries to rejoin conversations he was once at the heart of. The resulting strain nearly pushes them apart. He feels guilty for tainting her world with his messy legacy. She battles the frustration of watching him be treated like an outcast. Every day becomes a balancing act, trying to uphold her social obligations while fighting to honor her father's dignity. Though they stand together, she knows their worlds are crashing into each other, and the tremors from that impact can't be ignored. Annalise paces her quiet apartment, wrestling with the decision that's been gnawing at her for weeks. Should she go public with her father's side of the story? Part of her feels compelled to clear his name, to expose the powerful players who wrecked his life. Yet she knows there's a heavy cost to that kind of truth. Reopening old scandals could spark fresh backlash, drag her mother into the spotlight, and shred the fragile peace her father's trying to rebuild. One afternoon, she meets a friend from her university days, a budding journalist who's heard whispers about her father's return. Over coffee, Annalise hesitates, the weight of the secret pressing down on her. If she chooses to break this story, there's no going back. She imagines headlines about deceit, embezzlement, and the renewed media circus. But she also sees a glimmer of justice, the possibility that her father could finally be vindicated. Back at home, she talks it over with him. The prospect terrifies him. He doesn't want to be dragged through the mud again. Still, he admits part of him yearns for the record to be set straight. He's spent years shouldering blame for the actions of others. He no longer wants to hide like a criminal. Annalise thinks about the letters, the shady business deals, and the locked trunk of secrets they found in the estate. If they shine a light on these truths, would it free them or trap them further? That night, she stares at her phone, the journalist's number on the screen, paralyzed by indecision. She realizes the price of truth is steep, reputation, safety, even the slim sense of normalcy they've cultivated. The question hangs in the air. Is it worth gambling everything to force a reckoning with the past? Torn between vengeance and caution, Annalise finds herself searching for a deeper sense of peace. She remembers a small church her father once mentioned, a place he sometimes visited on lonely nights. Intrigued, she suggests they go together. When they step inside, the worn pews and flickering candles create an atmosphere of quiet reflection. A soft hymn echoes through the rafters, and Annalise feels her chest tighten with emotion she can't quite name. They sit side by side, sharing a silence that's as heavy as it is comforting. After a while, she musters the courage to ask him if he can ever forgive the people who betrayed him. He exhales slowly, admitting he's spent years hating them, replaying every moment he was wronged. But that anger has eaten away at him, leaving scars nobody else can see. He says he's not sure if forgiveness is something he can give freely, but he also knows holding on to rage hasn't healed anything. Annalise thinks about her own heart, all the resentment she's carried toward him for leaving her behind, toward her mother for the secrecy, and toward a society that turned its back. She realizes that while justice and accountability matter, so does her own well-being. Carrying bitterness only sinks her deeper into a cycle that benefits nobody. In that hushed sanctuary, father and daughter speak honestly about regret, sorrow, and the burdens they've both been lugging around. Neither has all the answers, but they sense something lifting, like a door opening where once there was only a wall. As they leave, she wonders if the path to redemption starts with forgiveness, of others, of themselves. It's a tentative, trembling step, but it sparks the faintest hope that healing is possible, even in the midst of so much pain. In the following weeks, father and daughter make a conscious effort to rebuild their fractured bond. The process is anything but smooth. They stumble over old grievances, unspoken fears, and the lingering ghosts of a life they both lost. Yet each heartfelt conversation seems to open a new path toward understanding. Sometimes they'll share a quiet meal in Annalise's apartment, reminiscing about simpler times before greed and betrayal tore everything apart. Other days, they tackle more practical issues, like sorting through leftover debt and navigating the legal quagmire that still haunts her father's name. Slowly, she sees glimmers of the man he used to be, patient, supportive, and unexpectedly funny when he lets his guard down. He, in turn, catches glimpses of the little girl he adored, now a poised young woman who carries her own burdens with remarkable grace. They laugh over childhood memories, like the time he taught her to ride a bike and she insisted on wearing a pink tutu for good luck. Small moments of shared joy feel like balm for the wounds life has inflicted. But the divide isn't bridged by nostalgia alone. They talk about the painful gap between her upscale world and the harsh reality he's experienced. She shows him the side of privilege he never saw from his perspective. The expectations, the loneliness, and the pressure to maintain a flawless image. He shares stories of nights spent under park benches, the sting of people looking through him as if he were invisible. Neither world seems right or fair on its own, and they both realize that healing requires blending these realities into something more honest. Through it all, they hold onto one crucial truth: the road back to each other is tough, but they're finally walking it together, determined to see where it leads. One late afternoon, just when Annalise thinks she and her father are on their own in this uphill battle, help arrives from unexpected places. It starts with a phone call from a former employee of her father's, someone who remembers him as a fair and generous boss. They've heard the rumors that he's resurfaced and want to lend a hand in setting the record straight. It's a small gesture, offering to testify about the ethics of his old business dealings, but it feels like a beacon of hope. Over the next few days, more surprises roll in. A distant relative, once estranged by the family scandal, steps forward with documents that could prove her father's innocence in at least one major accusation. An old lawyer friend who once turned a blind eye calls to apologize and offer pro bono assistance. Even a journalist who initially chased the most salacious headlines expresses regret and hints at publishing a more balanced piece now that the truth is starting to surface. Annalise and her father watch in amazement as this network of unseen allies forms a loose alliance. They're not all saints, some come motivated by guilt, others by a desire for redemption. But collectively, they offer the support needed to challenge the narrative that was crafted to destroy her father's reputation. Sitting at her small dining table, they sift through fresh evidence, reading sworn statements and tracking down leads. Every page turned feels like another step toward lifting the cloud of disgrace that's hovered over them. It doesn't solve everything. Powerful forces still loom, and the threats that once lurked haven't entirely vanished. But now father and daughter aren't fighting alone. They realize that sometimes the people who stand in the shadows do so not out of cowardice, but because they've been waiting for the right moment to emerge and do what's right. With their allies behind them, Annalise and her father begin to see a glimmer of light at the end of a very long tunnel. Bit by bit, they piece together a compelling account of his past, supported by evidence that contradicts the lies once used to bury him. Old bank records, hidden correspondences, and testimonials from trustworthy sources weave a story of a man who was set up to fail by those more powerful and ruthless. As they gather momentum, Annalise notices a change in her father's demeanor. He carries himself a little straighter, his voice has more conviction, and the haunted look in his eyes begins to fade. She, too, feels a renewed sense of purpose. All her life, she's been sheltered in a cocoon of wealth, but now she's stepping out as an advocate for truth, no longer content to be a passive bystander. In a way, this journey has allowed her to claim her own identity outside of the expectations placed on her by others. Of course, the road isn't smooth. Cynics emerge, accusing her father of orchestrating a sob story. A few powerful figures still attempt to smear him, scrambling to protect their reputations. But father and daughter push forward. They refuse to shrink under threats and half-baked rumors. They lean on each other, bolstered by the handful of loyal friends who've stood by them. Slowly, an image takes shape of not just a shattered past, but a renewed future. It's as if they're rising from the ashes of old betrayals, forging a new family narrative. Nights that once felt weighed down by regret now sparkle with cautious optimism. They're not fully free yet, but they can finally see the horizon. And in that soft glow, there's a certainty that they're done hiding, done letting others define their story, and ready to emerge stronger than before. Tension reaches a boiling point when the shadowy antagonist, who's been lurking in the background, makes a bold move. Threatening letters escalate into a demand for hush money to keep damning evidence hidden. The ultimatum is clear: pay up or the scandal reignites in a way that could destroy what little progress father and daughter have made. Annalise and her father refuse to bow to blackmail, determined to bring the truth to light once and for all. A secret meeting is arranged at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where every sound echoes ominously. Annalise stands firm beside her father, clutching the files and evidence they've painstakingly compiled. Their adversary arrives with a small entourage, confidence radiating from every move, as though the upper hand is guaranteed. But what this figure doesn't realize is that Annalise has prepared for this showdown meticulously, backed by allies ready to testify and the legal counsel that's been quietly gathering testimonies behind the scenes. He demands payment, sneers at their resolve, and threatens to leak false allegations unless he's paid handsomely. In response, Annalise calmly slides over a stack of documents that lay bare his own shady dealings, ready to be handed to the authorities if he pushes them any further. A standoff ensues, tension crackling in the musty air. Father and daughter refuse to back down. For the first time in years, her father stands tall, meeting the eyes of the person who helped orchestrate his ruin with unwavering courage. The final confrontation ends not with a brawl or dramatic fireworks, but with a swift blow of truth. Cornered by their evidence, the antagonist falters, realizing the weight of accountability is about to crash down. In that pivotal moment, father and daughter reclaim their power and their story for good. In the weeks after that tense showdown, the dust begins to settle. Some of the old accusations against Annalise's father are dropped, and others are refuted by new testimony. The media, sensing a compelling redemption arc, shifts its narrative. Headlines speak of a once vilified man's vindication and a daughter who never gave up on him. Life won't ever be the same, but father and daughter move forward with cautious hope. She no longer feels beholden to her mother's exacting standards or weighed down by public scrutiny. He, freed from guilt and shame, shows a smile Annalise barely remembers. They talk openly now about the years they lost, the regrets they carry, and the future they want to build. Her cozy apartment, once just a pit stop in her busy life, becomes a sanctuary of honest conversation. Annalise channels her newfound purpose into creating a small charitable foundation aimed at helping those who've fallen through the cracks, like her father once did. He joins her efforts, using his experiences to guide programs for those seeking a second chance. Together, they forge a new family legacy, one not defined by wealth or prestige, but by compassion and resilience. On a clear morning, they stand outside a newly opened community center, cutting a bright ribbon for a program dedicated to the homeless. Camera flashes capture the moment, but for them, it isn't about publicity. It's about forging a path forward that honors their journey. Annalise glances at her father, seeing the proud, hopeful man she once worshipped as a child. In his eyes, she finds the same fierce determination that's led them here. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't about reclaiming lost status. It's about finding your way back to each other and building something truer and stronger from the ashes.